Hi, and welcome to A Class of Their Own podcast, revealing the human stories behind their name. We will hear honest and intimate reflections from our guests who, despite their circumstances, shape a world that reflects their unique visions of success. Join me, Mira Magecha, to learn from these inspirational people and take the first step to make your own change. On today's episode, we're joined by Jack Villiers. Hi, Jack.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm feeling good.
How was your trip into the UK?
My trip was smooth. Flight was good. And yeah, it's nice to be in London.
I've known Jack for about 5, 6, 7 years coming up to. My God, it actually probably has been about 7 years, hasn't it?
Yeah, it must be.
We worked together and Jack is not the same person that I remember working with anymore. And we've spent some time in Ibiza together. I've seen some of the work that you've done on the journey, so I'm really excited about where this conversation today is going to take us. So let's get started.
Sounds good to me.
Who is Jack?
I'm going to try and answer this question without listing off a load of titles. And Jack is someone who is committed to fully engaging with life. And by that, I mean experiencing everything, feeling everything, and in essence, really showing up to life, because I believe that's how life should be lived. And then if I'm to give some titles, I'm a father. I would say leader summarizes me the best. And I feel that I show up as a leader in lots of different elements of my life, whether that's at home, whether that's with the trainings, the workshops, the retreats that I run, whether that's with the clients that I work with, whether that's with people I meet on the street. So that's really, for me, embodying a leader and a father. That's what feels really important in this time right now. And it's constantly evolving. Disclaimer.
And it really, go on.
Yeah, no, I was just saying disclaimer.
We're not the end products yet.
Exactly. So that's why I'm trying to move away from titles, because otherwise I feel like it's too static. But those two feel most resonant right now.
Who was Jack?
Where to start? So growing up, I was still very curious about the world and excited and engaged. And often that curiosity led me to get engaged in the wrong things. So I feel that when I look back at myself growing up now, I was quite lost in many ways. I felt that I was processing a lot of things that I didn't really know how to deal with. And that kind of led me to ultimately what were the right places, because it was all part of the journey. But at the time, difficult situations, painful situations, making lots of mistakes, messing things up. So I would say I was quite a messy person growing up. And there's been different stages of that as I've gone through life. And I think the thing that remains that I still have today is, I've always just wanted to be in connection with people. That's really where I feel in at my best. So even if I think about when we worked together, my job was definitely the job where I was always like connecting with people, whether it was in the company or out of the company. That's who I would say I was growing up. So I think the kind of essence of me was still there, but there was just a lot of things like masking it and on top of it, I would say.
How many stages would you say you've lived through already?
I feel like life has been quite an eternity. I think also having my daughter when I was 23 has really elongated my life, because when you're observing a person that you've co-created with someone else grow up, it kind of changes the time frame. And because I started that journey as a father so young at 23, it feels like it has been an eternity. But I think there's some core stages. I see like my childhood, then there was teenage years where I ended up, like I said, getting very messy and things were, going down the wrong path. Then I had this kind of big career section where I was, through a bit of luck and hard work and I think some talent, I was able to build a really good career for myself. And that also, though, even though it was an amazing experience and a great exploration, I also felt it wasn't totally in alignment with who I was. I feel that since I've hit my 30s, that's where things have really kicked in. And although I'm never going to be the finished product, I really feel I'm actually doing what I love. I feel in alignment where I live, my environment, the people that I surround myself with. So I'm definitely enjoying this stage, but I appreciate all of the other stages as well.
So talk us through childhood in terms of what it was like growing up in Jack's world.
Yeah. So grew up with my mum and my brother. My mum was a single mum. My dad left when I was 5 months old. He was a drug addict and an alcoholic, and although had had some success in life, wasn't really able to hold anything down stable, and marriage didn't work out, so they separated. And he would come in and out now and then, and I kind of remember that part of the curiosity that I mentioned was always that curiosity around what it meant to be a man, because my dad was absent. So my mum was left to play both roles, and she was amazing. And also at the same time, I don't believe it's possible for a mother to be the mum and the dad to truly meet all the needs that are required. So growing up, that really left me with what felt like an emptiness, not having my dad there. And then as I got older and I got towards my teenage years, I really tried to fill that emptiness with different things, usually things that weren't healthy, whether that was getting in trouble, or in crime, or with women, or all of these different kind of things. So I was always trying to sort of fill that void. And yeah, I think I spent a lot of my childhood and growing up really feeling quite misplaced just because of that kind of break in family connection. So that's how it kind of came through for me.
And being a child, did you know you were looking for the gap, or is that reflective now?
Now, in hindsight, I can see that I was always looking, whether it was looking at the cool people on the streets who had the most money, who had the cool cars, and being like, that's what it's it. That's where I've got to go to. That's what I've got to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, looking back in hindsight, I can see that I was always looking for something and trying to fill that void. And every time it didn't work, I'd kind of get to the end of the line with something. I'm a person of extremes still to this day. So it's like getting in trouble, and I'd push it right to the extreme, right to the point where it was literally going to ruin my life. And then I was like, no, probably shouldn't carry on doing this anymore.
Pull it back.
And then I'd find the next extreme. And the next extreme after that was work. How much money can I make? How hard can I work? How good can I be at this one thing? And I got to the very end of that line, and that led to burnout and a mental breakdown. And then I was like, okay, well, I can't do that. So it's been a thing of constantly finding things to fill that void. And then what I realized is actually all of the things that I needed were inside of me. I just needed to take a closer look at myself rather than always looking out there.
One of the conversations we've had is that people won't recognize who you are now compared to the Jack I knew 5-7 years ago. If there was a message that you could share with these people, what would it be?
Love me as I am. What would I share with these people?
Because you're still the same person.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if there's a particular message that I would share with people, but I think the people who have known me through that journey and through that evolution, I feel really appreciate me now, because said humbly, I always felt that I brought a lot of amazing qualities to life, to teams, to people, to relationships. And also there was a lot of things that I brought that were also quite difficult sometimes for people to deal with. So I think when people see me now, they see that evolution and they can appreciate it. So my message would be, thank you for being patient with me. It took some time.
So I remember a particular example.
Oh, God.
There's plenty, but I'm going to share one where we didn't know where you were at work. So we were in the office, you were supposed to be there, and we couldn't get hold of you. And it wasn't that we were going, where's Jack? Why is he not at work? It was more we were concerned about you.
Mm-mm.
Where were you likely to have been in terms of where life took you at this point in your life?
That's a really good question. Around the time that we were working together, I moved from working in recruitment agencies. I went and worked at Just Eat, and I had met someone. She had got pregnant. My daughter, who's 8 now, arrived. And it was really, really difficult. the mother of my daughter really struggled with mental health and various things. I also struggled with my mental health, so taking full ownership. It took two to tango. And I was essentially a 23-year-old young man holding in one hand, how do I look after a baby, essentially, and also balance then a job providing all of that, and also a partner who's having, you know, some quite difficult postpartum depression, if you want to call it that. I mean, it was really intense. And I was probably in some kind of situation where I was trying to balance all of that stuff and meet a lot of people's needs, but also in panic and overwhelm. That's something that's been really difficult for me. So I imagine around that time, and I can think about it, it's interesting because I remember the thing that allowed me to get away with things was that I was always really good at my job. I was very talented at my job. And then also there was some dysfunctional things, but I imagine at that time that there would probably have been some episode going on and me sort of working out, how do I deal with this, or not able to leave the house. And, you know, culture in the work environment has changed a lot, and Just Eat had a great culture. But even at that time, I didn't feel comfortable sharing what was going on in my life with everyone, or calling someone and saying, hey, this is really, really difficult. So I would just hold it and feel that I had to hold it all myself. And that's kind of what then leads to a snapping eventually. So I imagine there would have been some difficult situation going on like that.
And how did you deal with it? How did you manage what was going on for you at the time?
As soon as my daughter was born and I saw her, it gave me a reason to live. I really felt that leading up to that, becoming a father, often I didn't feel that there was a reason to live, whether that was showing up in my mental health and sort of depressive states and highs and lows that I would have, or also that I was just willing to take risks and to do things that were just stupid because I was just like, well, it doesn't matter anyway. And when my daughter was born, it was just that moment. I can't describe it as even how I understood it, but it was something very, just like a sudden change, almost in like my DNA, that was like, I need to provide for this person that I've created, and I need to grow up, and I need to show up in a better way. And that really, again, like I said, led me to start looking at myself and start to think, okay, well, you know, yeah, I would say that parenthood is one of the biggest mirrors. You know, all the reflections come up of where you're not in alignment in the way when you're raising your children. So yeah, I think that was the big change moment for me that kind of set me on a path where I was like, it's time for something to change.
And before she was born, what were you doing? What was your mechanism to hold your own mirror, or not hold a mirror up to yourself?
Yeah, I would say there was a lot of numbing with work, going out, drinking. Drugs came actually later, funnily enough. But drinking, going out, and just never really stopping and slowing down and thinking about how I was actually feeling. I had become a master of repression in my childhood because I was feeling really strong emotions about my dad not being around. I was then feeling really strong emotions about the stuff I was getting involved in and the impact that was having on people and how I was feeling. And I just became a master of repression. I could just bottle and hold things up and act like everything was fine. So my mechanism then was just to hold it, everything's okay. And then I'd have these big sort of snapping points now and then. And then I guess I'm a very resilient person because of what I've been through, and I would kind of recover quite quickly and just sort of get on with it. But that was how I was avoiding holding the mirror up, by just repressing, not feeling anything. I even think about this sometimes, that between the age of probably 9 or 10 till my early 20s, sometime after my daughter was born, apart from a few times, I don't think I ever cried, even when really challenging things were happening or I was really in a bad place. Never shed a tear. I was just like stone cold. So I think that was my mechanism.
Using that analogy of not crying, what was crying going to do for you that meant that you didn't?
I think crying would admit that I needed to receive support and I couldn't do it all on my own. There's this thing I've been thinking about recently, that having a chip on your shoulder is kind of amazing in one way, because that chip on my shoulder from when I was young of feeling I had it hard, I've been involved in this. My dad wasn't around. We didn't have much money. That chip on my shoulder led me to become very successful. That chip made me work harder, smarter, made me really hungry. And at the same time, that chip on my shoulder, like, led me to a point where, again, I just was like a stone inside. And that was my way of coping. And I think there was a belief system that if I let that go, then how would I continue to have the fuel to keep going?
Yeah.
So it was like just a continuous process of that.
Who was around for you in your life during this time?
My mum. My mum went through hell and back with me. And she is also a very, very resilient person and a very wise woman. So respect Mumsy. So really my mum, it's interesting now because of a lot of the work I do with men, the way that I view relationships that I have with men now versus to how I've had them during my life is very, very different now I see. And I think the reality was that a lot of the friends who are some of the which are still friends today who were around me at that time, well, they were supportive. You'll be okay, Jack. It's okay. Do you want to chat? That sort of thing. They were 23, 24 years old. And I'm a friend who's just had a baby. They're just in a completely different paradigm in where they're at in their lives. So there wasn't much support. My brother was a good support. He also had his own stuff going on, his own challenges. But really it was my mum and my brother. And I think where I got to is I was really on my own. And being on my own and that aloneness drove me to eventually break out and say I need to do something different.
What was the trigger that made you break out? So your daughter was born and you said that she helped you hold a mirror up to yourself. But other than her birth, was there something else that happened that meant that you had to do something differently?
There wasn't something else. There were other things that were happening. I think it paused me to take a step back and start to see, oh, there's a pattern here. This has been going on for quite a long time. What was really interesting is the feeling that things that I were doing that were maybe unhealthy habits or behaviors that I was doing suddenly didn't feel the same anymore. The dopamine or the rush or whatever it was that I was getting from it suddenly started to feel yucky, like out of alignment. It was like, how am I doing this? It was almost like my conscience. That sounds really extreme that I didn't have a conscience up until then. I think I always have had a conscience and there's always been a part of me that's very kind and very empathetic. That was always online. But some higher conscience kind of came online at that point and started to sort of say to me, or the way I was feeling when certain things were happening, that I need to do something different. So it wasn't any specific moments. It was a string of moments and awareness. Some awareness came to me in that moment of my daughter being born, of going through a really terrible first year, of, having someone who was really depressed, who I was also trying to support myself. And it was like, okay, there's got to be a different way of doing this. I can't do this again. And that was the awareness.
And what did you do that was different then?
Slowly, piece by piece, started to make decisions that moved me towards a better place. The first being acceptance of the fact that the relationship with my daughter's mother and me wasn't the right relationship to be in. And that was actually a big moment for me. It was really, really difficult because I had a belief system that if we broke up, I was just like my dad. So that forced me to stay even when things were really, really not good. And I remember, I think it was my birthday and Father's Day, which fall a couple of days. And the relationship kind of ended, but you could tell it was like really ending. And that was a moment for me that rather than try and keep fighting, because I felt like I was becoming my father if that happened, I accepted it. And I started to think of a new narrative that maybe I'm not going to be with her mother, but I can also still be an amazing father to her. And it was that belief system that then started to think, okay, well, if I can change that, then there's other things in my life that I can change as well.
Was your father in your life at this point?
No, he left when I was 5 months old. Then he was kind of in and out very rarely, to be honest. I have maybe 2 memories of stuff around like actual time that I spent with my father. And then when I was, I think about 10, he went to South Africa to rehab, got sober after X amount of years, started a new family there, And I maybe saw him once after that when I was in my teens, very briefly. But then before he died in November, I hadn't seen him for 20 years.
And you were building a new relationship with him?
Yeah.
At that time?
Yeah, we had some really beautiful conversations. And I feel that being able to sit down and to say to him, this is how I feel, this was the impact of your life decisions on me, and not expect anything back, that was really a testament to me of the work that I had done on myself, because I didn't need anything from him anymore. It was just a bonus that we were connecting and got to have conversations and share some things in the years before he died. Well, he died unexpectedly, so I did always have that. The boy inside me always thought, we're going to reunite, we're going to have like the Jerry Springer moment. And then, that was taken away, and it's something that I'm grieving still. So yeah, that was kind of the process.
Your life's taken a different direction because you've made certain choices. What were some of the early choices that you made to take you to the journey and the place you are today?
Choosing connection rather than separation. So rather than feeling I've got to do it all myself, there's no one else who probably has experienced what I've experienced, they have their own experience and no one's really interested in helping me or lifting me up, but actually changing that and thinking there's got to be some people out there who have been through similar things. Other men, in fact, was the first port of call, who've been through similar things and are also looking to connect and support each other. And that's then what led me to men's work. So that was kind of the catalyst of just believing that there was, and there was certain signs or conversations or small things that would happen, or I'd meet someone by chance. I was like, oh, there is other people out there that I can really connect with on this level who have been through similar things. So that was quite eye-opening for me.
So talk about the men's work, because I know that that's been fundamental in a journey, and how much you're involved in it now.
Yeah. So after I split up from my daughter's mum, started exploring different things in terms of how I could work on myself, met my current partner, went and did ayahuasca and all of these different things, and was kind of like, okay, there's this buffet of things out there that can hopefully help me work through some of the stuff that I need to work through. And as much as I did other things, which were really powerful and profound, and I would recommend, they worked for me, there was still this thing, that void around masculinity, what it meant to be a man, areas where I felt shame, disconnection, that was around, right? I was feeling that. And then funnily enough, the way that it happened was my partner went to a retreat, a women's retreat that your sister happened to be at. And she came back and I just sensed something different. Just something subtle, just in her energy, how she felt, and when she started to talk about it, and it just suddenly drilled into my brain this thing of there has to be something out there like this for men. So then the curiosity in me started to look and to seek, and what is it? Maybe it's this, maybe it's that, and nothing really ever hit. And then I found Sacred Sons, which is the men's work organization that I'm a big part of, that I'm a leader in, and I just saw these images of grown men, big men, like burly men, small men, older men, younger men, like breaking down and having emotions and supporting each other. And I saw it, and it was like, as soon as I saw it, I was like, I need that. I was like, that is exactly what I need. And it was during COVID, so my opportunity to go out to the US and to experience it was limited. So I did some like online stuff, which was a good sort of entrance point. And then as soon as I could go in and the borders opened, I went to Hawaii for a week and did like a deep dive training retreat, and it completely changed my life. There was something so profound around being in a space of men where there genuinely was support, connection. Yes, judgments still come up, but instead of judgments coming up and judgments being held, it would be, let's talk about the judgments. What is it that's coming up? And there was this intention of let's come together and let's become better men. And that for me was, of all the gangs that I was in my teenage years, I was like, this is the gang I've got to be in. Do you know? So it was really eye-opening for me, and I was able to process a lot of trauma that I'd had in a very somatic way. And I just instantly knew that this was something that I could do, and just became, as it is now, a massive part of my life. I've traveled to like God knows how many countries now and worked with hundreds, even thousands of men. And it's just something really special that I believe all men need, and it doesn't have to look a certain way. But I really see now as I embody this when I'm around and I meet certain men. In fact, I was on a plane yesterday and I sat down next to a man and suddenly started chatting. Next thing you know, he's opening up and talking about connection and all of these things. So you kind of start to attract it. But I really believe in some form or other, all humans need that connection. And I found it in men's work, and now it's opened up all these other doors of the other work that I do with men and women as well. But that was kind of the journey. And it's been wild to think that was only maybe 3 years ago. Yeah. And it's completely changed my life.
And it has completely changed your life. Outside in, you're a different person.
Completely. I'm a better father. I'm better at the work that I do. I'm a better partner. I don't really believe in the thing that there's good and bad people, but what I bring to the people around me, my contribution, my service, the way that I show up is 10x more positive. 100x more positive. And also I'm equipped. So when challenging things do happen in my life, I know that I can meet them in a good way, that I'm not going to repress. That's when you ask me who I am and I say I'm living a fully engaged, committed life, that means I'm not going to repress anything. Yeah. If I feel a strong emotion coming through me, something challenging, then I'm going to meet that head on in a good way, even if it's challenging. So this work's really expanded my capacity to live life in all areas.
This episode is brought to you by Adaventa, a leading online classifieds group and champion for sustainable commerce. With over 25 digital marketplaces, including Marketplaats, Leboncoin, Mobile.de, Klein & Zanga, Fotocasa, InfoJobs, and Kijiji, and more, they connect millions of people to trade on a daily basis. Adaventa is committed to being purpose-driven and both an inclusive work and marketplace for everyone, by creating a space where everyone feels like they belong and are valued for their difference. To find out more information, click in the links in the show notes below. I want to take us back a few steps before we go into men's work and human work, which is I know you're super passionate about and you do now. You talked earlier about going down the route of trying ayahuasca as an example. Mm-hmm. How did you find out about it? How did you get to the point where you wanted to explore more, understand more, be curious enough to potentially what other people may see as a risk?
Yeah.
And also maybe let's explain what ayahuasca is for our listeners.
Yeah. I won't explain ayahuasca deeply as if I'm an expert, but it's a plant medicine that is very healing, used by indigenous people, and now is more available, I guess, to people to go and experience it with different people in different places. And for me, the way that I always sum this up is that I saw something, or not saw something, I felt something in someone else that I wanted to cultivate for myself. And a really good example of this would be my partner. When I met my partner, she had been in Peru, she'd been doing Vipassana meditations, silent meditating for 30 days. She'd been doing all these things. And I met this woman who's now going to be my wife and the mother of one of my children. And I was like, there's something that she's cultivated that I haven't, and I really want it. A certain peace or presence, just kind of, again, floating through life, engaging with life, even when things are challenging. And I felt that in her, and that for me was the inspiration of, okay, well, where did you find that? And then to go seeking, and I see this often in life with the things that I've done to explore myself and my own personal development, is when I meet someone and I can feel that they've cultivated something that I, would also like to cultivate in myself. And it's not an envy or a jealousy. It's like a respect and thank you for bringing me this message, so now I can go and explore this thing. So that's really always been my guide, alongside, of course, looking on Google and reading loads of bullshit things and adverts and articles.
And there is a lot of bullshit out there, but it starts with the internal curiosity.
Exactly. And it's open. I think it's curiosity, and it's also openness and receptivity. So when I saw men's work, as I said, I saw these images, and I was like, something told me at like a deep level that I need to go and do that. And on top of that deep level was a ton of resistance. Who are these dudes? This looks weird. I don't want to do this. I don't think this is for me. and the openness and receptivity, and then also the courage is, are you willing to step through that? And that's definitely in life like a compass for me. Where do I feel the resistance? Oh, I feel the resistance around some parts of my relationship or my sexuality. Okay, well, maybe I should go and explore that. Or I'm feeling the resistance around doing this type of work. And it's being able to discern, is it just because it's not in alignment and it's not for you? Or is it because that you're afraid of what it might do? And often what it does is wonders, depending on what it is.
The thing that's coming up for me right now is the Jack I knew 7 years ago was, for a better term, a macho Jack.
Yes.
He was a boy's boy of, I don't have feelings, or I do have feelings, but I'm not going to tell you what they are. I'm not going to share what they look like. I'm not going to talk about them. How did that change? Because you will now openly have conversations, as you said, with the guy that you met on the plane, and people are starting to share stuff. Mm-hmm. How have you embodied that change within you that now attracts the right conversations, that attracts people to you because you can now help them?
It's as simple as doing the work on yourself. If, for me, my body and my head was full of trauma and limiting beliefs and pain, and I was always very wary of other people because I thought everyone was out to get me. I thought everyone was going to take something from me. I thought everyone wanted to hurt me, often, whether that was in relationships with men, with women, like whatever it was. So the first thing is I needed to create space in my body to receive new things. And that looked like actually, doing the shadow work, looking at my trauma and creating that space. And then the more space I've created, the more amazing things can come into my life. So really it was almost going backwards. When it got to the point of doing that work, it was going all the way back to my childhood. Well, how did I feel about my dad? Like really, I was fucking sad, devastated. I wanted a dad, How did I feel about the fact that we struggled financially and I didn't have the nicest clothes, or I had to wear hand-me-downs? I felt shit about it. I felt embarrassed quite a lot of the time if it was non-school uniform day. The first one I remember, I didn't have nice clothes and everyone's got nice Nikes and all of these things, And I had to go back and feel all of those feelings that I had repressed. And it's like going back through that timeline and feeling those things. And the more that I did that, I create more space in my life to accept new things, new stories, new ways of being. Does that answer your question?
If you were to go back and give Jack advice as an 11-year-old, what would you say to him?
Don't change anything because it's going to work out really well. Because I'm genuinely at a stage in my life right now, and I'm not going to say I'm happy. I am happy. I'm not always happy. Sometimes I'm sad. Sometimes I'm angry. So I'm feeling all the emotions, even the challenging ones. But I feel very grounded in this moment in my life that I'm in the right place and I'm doing the right things. And if I ever fall out of alignment and I do fuck up and I do make mistakes, then I've got the capacity and the skills and the belief in myself and the amazing people, the community that I've cultivated around me to get me back on track. So when I think about speaking to 11-year-old Jack, it's like, don't change anything because everything's going to work out. And there's also this different relationship I have with all of that stuff. Whereas when I had the chip on my shoulder, my relationship with all of those things was life was hard. I was given a hard card, and it was actually quite victim consciousness is the way that I would describe it. Now I look back on it and I'm like, that stuff's made me really resilient. I'm very good at communicating and reading people. You've witnessed the work that I do. The reason I can navigate those emotions in the space is because I've been in very intense situations. So when I feel the intensity of someone working through someone really difficult, well, I can be there with them because I feel comfortable in that intensity. Not all the time, but most of the time.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't change anything. I would just tell him to be compassionate with himself, keep going. And really for me, the big word that comes up is trust. Just to trust that what's going to happen will need to happen. You've just got to keep one foot in front of the other, one breath at a time.
What's your relationship with your mum like now?
Really good. We get on so well. We have our standard tiffs and stuff like that. Like after this podcast, going to meet my mum, meet my daughter, go for some dinner, we'll go for a walk. We have a really good relationship. She really accepts me. And I feel I'm in a space with her where I can tell her anything, however difficult it is, I can tell her. And it didn't always feel that way. In fact, I put her through hell, and then our relationship was very fraught because of all the stuff that was happening. And ultimately, the whole time, she was just worried about me. She just wanted to know that I was okay because she loved me. And I have so much respect for her now. I have so much respect for mothers in general, for the sacrifice, not only to bring a child into this world, but then to deal with all the shit that's going to happen. So I've got a lot of respect for her. We have an amazing relationship. She's an amazing grandmother. So although I didn't have a dad, I'm very grateful for the mum that I got given and the examples that she set for me, because really the way that I see her is she's like a magician. She did a lot with a little. That's really how my childhood was. My mum was able to make it feel, even when things were challenging, that actually everything was okay. So, yeah.
A year or so ago, you chose to go to Ibiza.
Yeah.
What and how did that come about? What was the driver for some of those decisions?
I was living life. We had suburban house, 4x4, kids, my partner, and I can't remember the exact moment, but I feel like it was a moment, or it was a series of moments where my partner and I were sitting sort of talking and kind of just looked at each other and just thought, what are we doing here? Like, we're not happy. This isn't, and the disclaimer I'll say is I have no judgments on anyone who chooses to live in the city. Everyone has, their own preference for where they're at in life. But for us, it just didn't feel that we were getting what we needed. The frequency of being with friends, of being with community. Everyone's quite busy, living in different parts, takes 2 hours to get from one side of London to the other, that sort of thing. And there was just a yearning from both of us to live life in a different way. Mm-hmm. And if you had have asked me a year or two before that, would I ever leave London, born and raised in London, I would have been like, no way, I'm never leaving the ends.
Yeah.
But there was just something inside that was calling for us to kind of go on an adventure. And yeah, Ibiza, we looked at Portugal, and Ibiza felt like a good place. Island life is really good. But I just find it really interesting with this, how that changed, that you could never do this, you could never live this life. And now that I've done it, I guess the message that I always say to people is it is possible to completely change your reality in your life. You just have to be willing to make some hard decisions. And for me, the real hard decision was that I knew my daughter would still be in London, which was really, really big for me. And could I still be a present and proactive father while she was in London? Was I willing to make the commitment that would require, flying back as often, doing the holidays and stuff? And there were some times where I didn't know if it was possible. And now I believe, being kind of a year and a half, nearly 2 years into it, that it is. So I always say to people, I often hear people say, oh, I'm just stuck. I couldn't possibly. It's like, you could. You just need to be willing to make some difficult decisions.
And do things slightly differently to what the norm is.
100%.
Where are you today? And I don't mean literally on the island of Ibiza, where are you? But where are you, and what is important in the work that you do? Yeah.
The last few years for me has been a real journey of integrating everything. So I have the experience from growing up, being a bit of a wheeler dealer, hustler.
Much better word, yeah, hustler.
Things being quite difficult, having to be resilient, having to be very aware, having my wits about me, which gave me a lot of great experience, like I said, although it was challenging at the time. Then I've had this amazing career that I look upon with loads of love and gratitude, working in recruitment, and then in these amazing tech businesses, running my own consultancy, advisory company, coaching, all of these things, which just gave me so much. I actually feel that a lot of the things that were dysfunctional, I managed to fix by becoming a much more functioning person and working in these really high functioning environments where you really have to use your brain and be very smart and creative and communicate a lot. So I've got all of that. And then in parallel, for the last few years, I've been doing this deep transformational work, mainly with men, and now more recently with men and women as well. And I remember when I got to Ibiza, I was looking at the kind of timeline of my life and all these gifts and things that I have to bring. And I was kind of like, this is a really difficult game of Tetris. How do I fit this all together into embodying like what I really want to do, as you're asking? And it's been a process that's been quite difficult. So for example, letting go of the tech startup scale up, the name, the career, the sort of, what's the word that I'm looking for? The
kudos?
Yeah, the kudos and like the ego basically of I've achieved these things and I'm quite known in this industry, letting go of all of that and being willing to almost let that die so I could sort of integrate those skills with this other stuff that I was doing that a lot of people, I guess, in the tech industry might be like, what is this stuff Jack's doing now when I've spoken about it? It's kind of odd. What's changed? So where I'm at this point now is how do I integrate all of that into something that feels really good? And the way that that has looked now is finding organizations and business leaders and people who, yes, they want to build successful careers, successful businesses, all of that stuff, but they want to do deeper work as well.
Yep.
And what I've seen is that when leaders, when CEOs, when founders, whoever start to do that work on themselves, their ability to be present for their family and present for their employees goes 10x, on both sides. So I'm at this point of how can I integrate all of that and offer something that will really bring the people to me who are meant to work with me.
What is the work that you do? Because we've talked about men's work, we've talked about men and women, we've talked, like I could be sitting here going, what are we sitting around in circles hugging trees and what is it that we're doing?
We can do that after the podcast.
No, let's not do that. It's too cold.
Yeah.
But what is it? What is the work that you do? What is the leadership you embody?
Yeah.
What is the work?
Well, if you're forcing me to say titles, then I'm a coach. So I do coaching. I work with people one-to-one. I sometimes still work with teams, leadership groups and teams to increase their performance, their connection, their awareness. Basically, how do they kick ass at what they do and not do it at the sacrifice of losing themselves in the process? So that would be one thing that I do. I still really enjoy some of the one-to-one clients that I work with. I also advise and help them scale and grow their businesses because that's something I have a lot of experience doing. So it can be working on all levels. Mm-hmm. And then I have the trainings that I run, which are for everyone. You've got people showing up who are elders, older folks, younger people who have jobs, people who are working out what their job is, stay-at-home mums, stay-at-home dads, your average whatever, people from all walks of life who want to show up and do a lot of deeper work on themselves. And the thing that I find interesting now is a lot of the clients that I have in more like the company space, right? Founders, leaders, that type of thing. They then see that I'm doing this other work over here and they're like, I really want to do that. Can I come to one of the retreats? And now I'm seeing more of those people show up on my retreats and my trainings. And then the people who are coming to my retreats and trainings are saying, oh, I'm actually doing this really interesting thing. Do you want to come and talk about my business with me? So it's all just feels like it's slowly integrating into a kind of bubble of work. But really in essence, it's coaching people, guiding people, advising people, bringing people together so they can form deeper levels of connection and honestly helping people work through a lot of their shit. That's honestly what I do now. Often I'll work with a founder or a leader and they'll say, Jack, I want to increase my performance as a leader, business, and I can meet you there. I can do all of that stuff. And then after 3 sessions, they're saying, actually, there's this other thing that I feel you can help me with. So I really feel, again, this whole thing that I've been sharing around separation versus connection, we shouldn't separate, everything is one. We are one person, we have one life. So the work that I'm doing now is working with people on all of those levels. Like, let's work on your business. Let's work on some of the stuff that's holding you back. Maybe it's from your childhood. Let's work on your self-belief and your confidence. Let's work on your relationships with your partner, with your children, whatever it is. So it's really holistic without using a buzzword.
Yeah, and it is. It's about how do you be who you are? How can you bring your whole human self to be your whole human self in all aspects of life rather than going, this is me at work, this is me at home, this is who I am. There's no such thing as work-life balance because it's one, to your point. It's a whole, and then how do you break it up to ensure that you're doing all the things that are right for you?
And without the cliche, and I feel very privileged to live in Ibiza, but every day I wake up and I don't have that dread. I do not have that dread. Even if I've got a load of calls or I'm feeling tired, it's like I'm choosing to do what I do, and that feels really, really good. And I think the more people embrace all those different elements and create less separation, then the happier or the more content or the more aligned on purpose that they can become. So that's what I really, going back to that point where I said I see something in someone and I want to cultivate that, a quality, a behavior, an experience. Often the people I work with, they see that in me, and that's, where it can start.
If there's anyone listening who comes from that corporate space, comes from that corporate world that's going, I'm curious, but I'm not brave enough to take that first leap, what advice or words would you share with them?
Start slow and be gentle with yourself. Introspection and self-discovery and personal development can be a big bang thing. I'm just going to book that thing and just go and do it. It looks crazy. That's sometimes really needed. And also it can be more subtle. It can be, okay, I'm just going to start journaling. I'm going to ask myself some more questions. When that little voice comes up saying that I should do this, or I feel resistance to that, I'm actually going to inquire a little bit deeper. Where is that coming from? What sensation in my body is it giving me? And you can start very gently on your own. I think there's something really powerful when, as a person, you're having those feelings, those thoughts, that curiosity, and then you open up a dialogue with someone else who also might have that openness. That's, I feel, where things can really start kind of moving, when you're in connection with other people. So the advice would be just not to ignore the feeling that maybe there's something out there that you should be experiencing or that you're curious about, or just that feeling of something should change. I think my experience is that often I had that voice, that feeling that things should change, that I should be trying something different. And I just ignored it because I stayed within the same paradigm. I was like, well, I can never leave doing this because of the salary and the share options and all of the, I've got to just stay doing this. This is the rest of my life, to become a chief people officer or something like that. And then when I think about it, the whole way along that journey, even though I was good at the job that I was doing, I don't want to do that. That is definitely not the thing that I want to do. I'm sure you can maybe resonate with that.
Maybe just a slight,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you know what I mean? So it's like, just start by listening to yourself. A lot of the time I found myself consuming so many other things, going out, phone, this, whatever, that I never really slowed down to actually connect with myself and be like, what do I actually want? So that would be my advice for people. Just slow down and feel, inquire, and from that place things can emerge.
And allow the feelings to be whatever they are without judgment.
That's it. And it's okay. I think this thing around judgment, it's okay to have judgment, but still be willing to go into that judgment.
And explore where it comes from.
Like I said, until that moment that I arrived, all the different retreats, ceremonies, things that I lead, take part in, or the first ones that I ever did, I always have that feeling coming up of maybe some judgment or some resistance or whatever. And it's just, am I willing to just open the door and step through? And I feel like when you do that, amazing things happen, and it doesn't have to look a certain way. Just because I do it this way and I decided to move to Ibiza and the stuff that I post looks like this, and that brings up some judgments for people. It doesn't have to look a certain way. It can look as much as, going and connecting with people at a sports club just because you feel you don't have much connection in your life. Whatever, it doesn't have to look a certain way. Yeah. Just listen to yourself.
Breaking down the shouldisms of life.
Exactly, yeah.
We started this conversation with who is Jack? Having had this conversation and the reflections, is there anything you would add to who is Jack?
I don't think so. I feel what I shared around showing up and engaging and committing to life, that feels, when I strip it all back, that just feels like the one commitment, the one way of living that feels most resonant with me. And I think it's just to highlight that thing that I am always changing. That's why I find it so difficult to ever put labels on things, But again, my commitment is, rather than waiting to be this finished article before I share myself with the world, I'm committed to sharing the work in progress that I don't quite know, that I'm doing this thing. Maybe you have judgments about it, but I'm doing it and I like it and here's what it does for me, and just to really sharing that openly and vulnerably is another part of me that I guess I could emphasize.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed that conversation, then please share A Class of Their Own podcast with your friends and family and keep spreading the word to those that haven't discovered us yet. It makes a huge impact on our ability to have the people you want. Keep being you through connection, learning, and play. You are a class of your own.